Let's check to see if that music's a little too loud. Yeah. I think that's a little better, don't you think? All right. Welcome back to Beacon. I think this is episode 3. And if you like what you're seeing here, just go ahead and give that a like and comment below things that I can improve, and consider possibly subscribing. Today we're just going to work on a little bit more buildings, kind of do a chillax thing. I have a few things that stumbled across today. It's been kind of a busy day today, and so it's one of those things where I just didn't have a lot of time to think, and want to take some time, chill out, relax, do a little bit of map making. I think that'll be the best thing for it. So, one thing that I want to do is first start out kind of up here above this area. Give a little bit of a, like maybe a stables situation. Yeah. And make that, let's say, kind of a dark brown color. Anyway, so I was briefly flipping through the Pathfinder core rulebook, and I don't play 2nd edition Pathfinder. I do have the rulebook. I like using their rules as house rules for my game. I think they have a lot of very good ideas. I think that their system is a little bit too complex for new players. It's very intimidating, and I'm sure that if I learned it, it would become very easy for me to get used to what the system is, and that's fine. I don't need to play the game though, and a lot of people kind of get in this funk, and I'm guilty of it too. So don't think that I'm just sitting here throwing shade. Where if you don't do what they do, if you don't play their game, you are somehow not doing the right thing. And that's a completely incorrect way of looking at the world, right? And in this case, I enjoy Pathfinder 2 and the idea behind it. I enjoy the lore. I played Pathfinder instead of 4th edition for a long time. I was one of those people. That's what I did. And there is a lot to be said, a lot of good things that happened because of that game. However, 2nd edition is way too complex for me. It's a lot of little rules you have to remember, a lot of little things that just I don't want to do. I think that's the long and short of it. Is that it's just like I don't want to do all of that. It just seems way too much for me. So I choose not to. Yeah. Anyway, so it's a little bit off topic. The reason I brought up Pathfinder 2nd edition is I was kind of taking a look at their world and their maps that they have drawn in to the lore section of their game. And their lore is very deep, and I don't want to throw shade on that as well. However, their maps seem to be square. And you'll see this a lot with map makers, is they'll draw square maps, because what happens is that, and I'm just going to pull down Beacon here, right? You have a square sheet of paper. You need to fill every square inch of that paper, right? So I'm reach up here. I have my world, my setting, and then you'll see something like similar to that, right? Get that on there. There's entire sections right here and right here that are missing. I'll just throw that down there for now. There's whole sections of the map that are blank, where I put in, other things like, in this case, titles, legends, ocean, compasses, anything that I like. The reason I do that, first of all, is it's nice to have space to do things. And second of all, it looks more natural that way. Because you look at the Earth and a substantial more amount of landmass sits above the equator than below the equator. I don't know what the exact number is, but it is substantially more, to a hilarious degree. And it's just the way that the Earth is. So there is that particular fact. And second of all, we want to look and see for patterns as humans. That's just how we are. We like to see how things have developed, how things are moving, and how things really make sense to us. And if you create something that is more of a what's the best way to put this? If you create something, just gonna put that right there, that is square to fill your sheet, then other humans will recognize it. Plain and simple. Other humans will look at it and see exactly what you've done. And I mean, you want to make something that looks realistic, and we can get into a whole bunch of different ideas surrounding that kind of notion of what does realistic look like. But at the end of the day, a random number generator, just as kind of an idea behind that idea, will sometimes generate the same number multiple times in a row. Whereas if you tell a person to generate random numbers, they won't. And that's how you can tell there's a pattern. That's how you can tell that there's actually a little bit more behind the scenes than sometimes you care to admit. And there's a substantial amount of people that believe that if you just make it random, or if you just fill the sheet, right, because you're a completionist, if you just fill that sheet, then you'll be better off for it. When in actuality, people who have that eye, people who see what you're doing, know exactly why you did what you did. You need to fill that sheet. You need to fill that pattern. And then it becomes obvious. It breaks that illusion for them. So the important thing is to build entire things outside of the mold. So if you have a square sheet of paper, don't fill it. Leave empty spots. And the same goes for when you are building lore in your world. You want to make sure you leave empty spots. Why won't this go in? Yeah. You want to leave empty spots. And the reason, I discussed this in one of my videos, and if you haven't gone and watched that one, that's a good one. It's actually called Leaving Gaps in Your World. And the reason that one is important is because gaps is where your players will live, essentially. They will become ingrained with your storyline in such a way that it becomes more a part of who and what they are. because they're going to be allowed to develop that part of your world, that part of your lore. And that's a powerful, powerful thing. And that's one way that you can get your players to invest more in your world lore. Is if you say, for example, a few of my players have been like, I want to play X race. What does that look like? And my immediate response is, well, I don't know what that looks like. I haven't really done a lot of development on that one. What do you think that should look like? And it's almost like giving permission to help develop your lore. It says, all right, okay, I see what you're doing now. You left that gap open, and now I feel like I'm the one that gets to fill it. Yes, I do want to do that. And it engages that player with your lore, especially if it's something that they're passionate about. If they want to play a specific race because of, Kenku, for example. Like, you have this really cool idea for a race, and how does that race look in the idea of this specific world? And they're asking you, and your immediate response is, I don't know. How does that look? What do you think? Should it look like this? Should it look like that? How does that differ from other things, right? How does it differ from other races? And why is it one way or another? Oh, I like that. Yeah. There's a lot of breathing room there, and if you don't allow for that breathing room within your lore, and consequently within your maps, nobody's able to explore that, and you're taking away that exploration aspect that I talked about in the last video. There is so much that can be done to give your players better lore sharing opportunities. And leaving gaps in your lore, and then leaving gaps in your world, super, super important. Maps is a really good physical representation of that. So, if you are a completionist, and I know there's some of you out there, my advice to you is to build something, build anything, right? And then say, I wonder what's there. And then just leave it. Leave it for somebody else to discover and find. And I guarantee you it's going to be one of the coolest experiences of your life. Yeah. Anyway, so just to let you guys know kind of some of my map building and ideas, I built this little courtyard area. I'm thinking this is like a guards barracks with like a parade field. In fact, I probably want to put in a few more buildings here. I want to build in the barracks and military barracks. I mean, it doesn't have to be fancy. Let's just go ahead and that. The reason I'm saying it doesn't have to be fancy is because, to be honest, the town doesn't care how people sleep. The only thing they care about is how they do their job. So you have an administration building here, you have barracks here, you have a parade field for getting everything ready for the day, maybe doing some mustering and and fighting drills and learning how to fight and stuff like that. And I think having it right off the main plaza is going to be really, really important, just because of quick reaction time. And I think I'm going to put another one down on the other side of that, as well as one up on top of this building here. So there can be pretty good coverage. I want the one on top to be the main, and I think I'll build that out right now. I want it to be the main headquarters of whatever police force is present within the city itself. And that's important. It's like, how is the rule of law going to be dictated within your environment, within your world? And the rule of law is a very important idea that a lot of people just kind of gloss over, and it should never be glossed over, because that is how your characters that are criminals, they want to role play that rogue, they want to role play that assassin. What does law and order look like for them, and how can they not only supersede the law but like embarrass them? That's a great role-playing opportunity. It's like, oh well, you embarrassed this guy or this guy, and now, or even like assassinated something, but you got that like hardline detective that is there to find the thief or the assassin and bring him to justice. And that's a really good plot line and plot hook. And that kind of also leads to another idea of, you hear this all the time with DMs, is like, are you building the story around your characters? And part of that, is law and order. Are you building that story around your characters? And how does that look for them? And if you do it right, they'll be very happy with what you're able to produce. If you do it wrong, and I guarantee you're going to do it wrong a few times, they're going to ask, WTF guy, what is wrong with you? Why can't I do this or do that? And, sometimes the answer is, well, storyline. But I've always found that the best way to run a game is to keep the story going and allow people, especially your players, to kind of dictate what's going on within the story itself. And I'm not saying let them run the story, but don't say no. And I say that with a big asterisk, because I do say no all the time. Just ask my players. All the time I say no. So what I mean by don't say no is, when they have a really cool character idea, don't just say no and leave it. I want to ensure that they're having a good time, and I will generally say no, and this is why. And usually if you can come up with a good enough reason, the player will just be like, okay, I get that, that's fine, I can be okay with that decision. And that should be good enough. And if you're having difficulty with people in your group and they won't accept that decision, well, sorry to say it, but there is a possibility that you might be playing with the wrong group of people. Saying no is an important part of being a DM, but it should never be arbitrary or callous. There should always be a reason behind it. And one of my big things that I do is that I house ruled the wish spell straight out of the casting list, the spell list. Wish spell I moved over to a epic boon. And I had a discussion with one of my players, and they brought up a really good point, is that they really wanted the ability to kind of play around with the wish spell. And I used the wish spell quite a lot when in my younger years, when I was more heavy into playing. And as a DM, I know the abuse that can come from that because I did that. And so building that kind of experience, that's very difficult for me to just say, yeah, okay, yeah, you can do that. You go ahead and abuse that kind of mechanic in my game. And I wasn't happy with that. So I was like, no, not going to happen. Sorry, not sorry. And for me, it was one of the best things that could have ever happened to my late game, because they weren't just throwing around the wish spell, doing this, doing that, wishing monsters and bad guys out of existence, and then me having to come up with a menagerie of different counter spells, countermeasures that other wizards and stuff have. And then the second part of that is that I was able to give the wish spell capabilities to non-casters. And that changed the dynamic in such a huge way. Now, keep in mind, there was no straight non-casters in my level 20 game. Everybody was some sort of caster, third caster, or half caster. Like, they could all cast spells. And that's a balancing point. That's a balancing issue. And something that I've been trying to remedy a little bit here and there. And so I want to, and part of that is developing new armor systems, new armor special abilities, resistances, stuff like that. And then the second part of that is fleshing out weapons, special abilities, and even magic weapons. And so giving the martial classes a lot more capability within their equipment and their ability to use said equipment as opposed to spells. And then punishing anybody who takes a low strength score. Because as well as having only casters within the group, and I need to put another note in there. I did have a monk. It was a Kensai monk, and I guess that doesn't count as a caster, so I lied. I'm sorry. I take back my previous statement. There was one non-caster, and arguably that person had some of the most difficulty getting through the level 20 encounters, or higher for that matter. And I really had to give them opportunity within the combat itself, and that goes into encounter design. And that's a little bit different, and that's not map making in the slightest. And I completely lost track of where I was going with that. Oh, I'm sorry. Saying no. It's very important just to make sure that whenever you do say no, you have a reason. Always have a reason. Don't just say no because you feel like it. Give yourself the opportunity to think it over. And then secondly, there it is. Sometimes my Illustrator just decides to not work properly. Secondly is kind of running the game, running the table, an idea behind an idea, I guess. An idea behind an idea. Something I do at my table is occasionally I'll just have a rules expert. A non-designated, I didn't talk to them beforehand and be like, hey, can you be my rules expert? But I know people who know the rules at the table, the actual, Jeremy Crawford said this and they tweeted this out. And so when, a rules question comes up, and let's be honest, sometimes I can't be bothered to keep up on all the rules, and that makes me a bad DM in some people's eyes. I'm more focused on the story. I'm more focused on the capabilities of the players and building that story within the world that they're playing in. And so I'm more concerned about that. And so when it comes time to Illustrator. When it comes time to like decide on a ruling or something like that, and it's like, well, this is something that I'd like to do. Da 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 da. I will unceremoniously just look at my rules guy and be like, hey, is that in the rules? And they're like, yeah, it says this, this, and this. Cool, let's do that. And it's not always the same person in every game. Really, it's not. And that is something that just keeps the players on their toes, because your rules guy is generally somebody that knows, and they usually catch on to the rules guy, but they know what's going on eventually. Yeah, I just repeated myself there. That's all right. They'll catch on, and then you change. That's the long and short of it. Is this, they catch on. Okay, well, no, I'm the rules guy, and it's like, oh, I'm sorry, no, you're not. Actually, I'm gonna change that. I'm gonna move it over to this person instead. And sometimes the rules guy can be wrong, and when that happens, you just move on and you say, okay, well, let's figure something else out. So, yeah. Anyway, so I want to put in another structure over here, and right now I'm making a lot of complexes. I'm making a decent amount of military structures. The reason I'm doing that is because, yeah, like I said before, you need to have some sort of legal presence, legal opportunity for your criminals to be criminal. And so I want to go back to the wish spell. I want to go back to like what the wish spell means as a DM versus a player. And so I moved the wish spell over to the epic boon, and then this player, he liked that, but then he also discussed with me later on that he really felt frustrated that he wasn't able to play with that cast any spell ability. And so being flexible, and this is all part of saying no, is the fact that, I'm going to revise that host rule. I'm actually going to be re-adding wish back to the spell list, right? But this time I'm going to basically say, okay, this is a limited wish. This is something that is just purely for the spell casting capability, and that is it. And I want to see how they react to that, because that is a very important distinction. I want to make sure that my caster classes don't feel like I'm just crapping them on them all the time, because really, I mean, let's be honest, in vanilla 5th edition, casters win. Casters win. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. There is no... Yeah, if you make it to a high level game and you're not playing a caster, you're the exception. You're pretty freaking awesome martial class, and you've managed to get farther than most other martial classes, and it's something that I seriously think that they should fix in this new 1D&D thing that they're doing. Excuse me. I've been muted for the last little bit. Apologies. And so I was just thinking, built a bridge there, and if that wasn't clear, that's kind of like, there's going to be a lot of bridges across this river, and I'll be doing that same thing. I just wanted to kind of get that one set up to begin with. Along the same note of like Wish, removing that from the spell list, I went through the spell list of like 7th, 8th, 9th level spells, even 6th level spells, and I produced a list of roleplay only acquisition. And so these are like powerful spells that really are game changing and affect so much of combat, so much of specific things within the framework of the game, that it really sets casters apart. And I know that's why you become a caster. But my big belief is that a constraint should and will breed creativity given the right input. And so if you are willing to work around the constraints, you can create something that's a lot more valuable. So, for example, I put a restriction on Simulacrum. It is a powerful wizard spell. I had 2 wizards in the group that both wanted to learn Simulacrum, and they were doing a back and forth. They would be like, okay, I'll learn these spells, you learn those spells on level up, and then we'll just swap, and then we get 4 spells or however many spells per level up, which is great, because I really didn't give out a lot of spell loot. I didn't give scrolls or anything else like that. In hindsight, I should have been better at that, and I didn't, and so it's partially my fault. But the reason I gated Simulacrum behind role-playing things is because it created more of a sense of like, I've got to find this. I've got to find this thing. Oh, why am I putting water here? I want to put a building there. I gotta find this spell, right? I've got to find how to make it. And what I did is I didn't just say, you can't have it. Too bad, so sad. I said, no, you can't have it, but it's out there. Figure it out. And that became much more of a, for lack of a better word, gameplay loop than anything. And there's a lot of fun stories behind that. And again, the same player that lamented the use of Wish in that very real way, which, I mean, that's a just thing to have a gripe about. He really wanted to kind of see what that use of Wish was going to be like, and how that can be manipulated, and and comboed off some of his other spells. All fair points. He really liked the idea that he had to work for some of his spells. It wasn't just like, oh yeah, you get it, that's fine. It's more of a, okay, all right, but now he had to learn Simulacrum from the big bad guy, because the big bad guy was using it. So they managed to kill a few of the Simulacrums of the big bad guy, and through a series of successive rolls and role-playing experiences, they were able to build their own Simulacrum. And that was a much more substantive experience for him. He remembers that a lot more because of the way that it was approached. And it was a lot more of a cool idea for him. And it was an experience. And I think that's more important than experience points, is the experience of your players and how they interact with your environment. And as a DM, you should be providing that experience. If you're not, well, stop it and just do it. So, yeah, that's all I really have to say about that. Let's just kind of focus it a little bit more here. Let's get a good unite going. I really do need to spend a little bit more time fleshing out major parts of the city and really building in little courtyards like this. And I want to make sure that I keep enough open for thoroughfares, for people to walk, move around the city, horses to move around and do their thing. And this idea, if you haven't guessed it already, orange is the color of the security forces, the city guard. And I'll be adding a lot more little kind of like tiny little outposts, especially when we start working on the branches of Beacon and how those will be fleshed out. Really, I just want to make sure that this area becomes a little better done. And I want to create a few entrances to the underground. And I think I like that, because that's going to be a major part. This is going to be a 2-leveled city. And part of that is big entrances. And as far as architecture goes, I'm not really concerned about like individual specific architectures. Really, it's just about shape at this point. And that's going to be the big thing. We're going to get some textures going. We're going to get some really cool effects going. Illustrator is a great tool, but it does have its limitations. Usually you can tell instantly when something's made in Illustrator, and the reason for that is because, well, it's cartoony. It has these weird lines. Obviously, like you can get rid of those weird lines and be like, okay, I want to do that, and I want to do this, and add texture in, and that's all well and good. But at the end of the day, you're gonna have that's very manual experience. Manual, yes, manual. That's a hard word for me to say today. Apparently, I tried to say that earlier and it just didn't come out right. So, yeah, there we go. If you have any questions on like the shortcuts I'm using and stuff like that, I try to call them out, but I'm not really the best at doing that all the time. So, yeah, let's get some more of these guys in. Get my pointer tool, get that out there. Really what this is supposed to represent is like differences in like people building on to the back of houses, you know, that are all like built together in one long building. There we go. Something similar that you'd see in big cities, big medieval cities. It's very common to see this kind of like back structures built on top of it. So I'm just gonna mimic that old world look, and you know, it's not gonna be perfect, and it's not supposed to, and it's okay. You don't have to make things perfect. You know, I'm giving you permission to do something, and repeating patterns is fine, something like that. And that's something that's kind of a big push for me, is there is this idea with the modules and with the official content that's coming out, and even like stuff on the DMs Guild, you're getting these ideas where you almost need to get permission to do something, and that always bothered me. And I fed into it when I was playing and running 3.5. It's always felt like I needed to find it in a source book, right? Find it in the source book, and then you'll be good to go. well, I through a lot of experience and a lot of failure. Let's be honest. Experience is failure. I was able to kind of build my own world. I built Neoshe inside of this microcosm, and it really happened kind of late in 3.5. Before that, I was just kind of running different worlds, different ideas, and nothing solid had ever really taken root until Neoshe. And the funny thing is I found some of my really old original drawings and ideas and stuff like that, and it took a completely different path than I had ever expected it to go. So that's good. That's good. You want things to be fluid. You want things to evolve with your players, and it goes again straight back to that idea that you build the world for your players. And if you're not doing that, well, there might be some issues, because your players are the reason why you're playing the game. Your players are the people that make your world come alive. And I've been seeing some videos pop up lately about playing D&D with yourself, and that kind of makes me sad a little bit. That makes me sad, because you shouldn't be playing D&D by yourself. The game is literally a game that's designed around the idea of playing with other people, and that's the beauty of like virtual tabletops. But if I was gonna give anybody any advice, one player, one single bit of advice, is that you need to find a physical group. You need to play with people that you can look at and that you can sense and have a conversation with, and have a sidebar with, and then not feel bad, because there's so much more to that interaction than just playing a game. It's about being in a physical space, and if you're not doing that, you are shorting yourself, long and short. You're giving yourself a disadvantage. And so I hope that you don't take that the wrong way. I'm not saying you don't have any friends, go away. No, what I'm saying is, if you don't feel like you can play with anybody, or if you can't find a group, well, build your own. Who says that you have to play? Why can't you just run a group? Why can't you just take some of your friends? I mean, D&D is so mainstream now. It's like, hey, did you want to go play Dungeons and Dragons? Okay, yeah. It's very interesting, because I started playing D&D when it was like, do you play D&D? It was like, you had to like suss them out. You're like, okay, so is this guy cool? Is he cool? It's like almost like a drug deal going down. It's like, is this like cool? Is he gonna be okay with this? Is this cool? All right, and you just kind of like feel somebody out, and then you're like, hey, so I run D&D. Yeah, I run D&D. I like to play it too. Say, you want to join my group? Yeah, no, we can't be seen together though. Like, we might be friends at the D&D, but like we can't be seen together. Like, my friends can't see you. And that was my high school experience. And now it's so mainstream that people like, hey, did you catch that Critical Role episode last night? That was insane. It is mainstream now. You just need to find the right people to play the game with you. And if you really are bad at socialization, finding that group at the game store, at, meetup.com, even just starting to build a friend group and say, hey, let's try this crazy game. I heard it was awesome. This is great. Let's just try rolling it. And I love it when I'm at the game store and there's a new group of people. They're picking up the starter set and then watching them as their eyes light up. And I've got, and this is gonna age me, but I've got 20. I started playing in 2000, so I've got 22 years of playing experience, and it's amazing to see them light up and just do the exploration. And I love having new players in my group for that exact same reason. It's a little bit selfish of me, and I shouldn't be doing that, but I think that the exploration part of the game, discovering the rules, and I guess I have an admission to make. I have been running 5th edition since 2015, 2014. So not the whole thing. I played Pathfinder for a long time before I converted over. But yeah, so I've been running it for 6 years. I've yet to read all of the DMG. I have yet to read cover to cover Player's Handbook. Because I realized when I switched over from 3.5 to Pathfinder and then from Pathfinder to 5th edition, the rules don't matter as much as you think they do. What really matters is the sense of fairness from the rulings, right? And so if you aren't being fair with your rulings, well, then the rules matter. But it's and I can feel the frustration coming from some of you. It's like, of course the rules matter. Yes, of course the rules matter. But as long as everybody agrees on the same set of rules, what does it matter which rules those are, right? And if you trust your DM to not hose you over and do things selfishly, then why do the rules matter, right? As long as everybody knows what the rules are ahead of time. And that's why a lot of YouTube channels out there, when there's like edge cases for specific rulings, especially surrounding something like Simulacrum, talk to your DM beforehand, right? Because it's not all cut and dry. Because it's not like, well, the rules say this, or the rules don't say this. Okay, the rules don't say this, but that doesn't mean they explicitly says that you can do something, right? And so that's an important distinction, and that's something that you need to discuss with your DM. And I hope that you do have those discussions and you have them often. So anyway, I'm rambling now. I've even stopped drawing this map, but kind of okay with some of that, and some of the progress that we've made. Again, this is kind of a really slow kind of process. I'm just gonna keep on adding, and hopefully you enjoy the content, and then enjoy the conversation as well. And let me know if you guys think that I should do this live streaming. Like, I have to time it just right. I do have a young family, and I do have to time when I record to when they are not apt to interrupt me, and so you wouldn't be able to hear them in the background. But other than that, like, if you guys would like to see some live streaming, if you guys would like to see other mediums or topics that you'd like me to address and maybe talk about, we can do that as well. Anyway, I think that'll be all for today. I hope you have a wonderful morning, afternoon, night, whatever that may entail, and we'll see you next time.